Hey everybody, I'm here with Brian Marren. He's the CEO of Arcadia Cognorati. So Arcadia has this interesting methodology that came out of the Marine Corps. It was in this program called Combat Hunter, where the Marines learned to spot ambushes ahead of time. And these guys have actually worked with DARPA programs. The Army even has their own version of this. And now everyone is building AI. They actually have the same problem that Arcadia has actually solved for decades. Brian, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So, for the people that have never even heard of Arcadia Cognorati, what do you guys do for someone that doesn't even know anything about you guys?
Yeah, well, we're a solutions provider, and we get into what we call human behavior pattern recognition analysis, which we'll talk all about today. But very simply put, Arcadia teaches people how to see more, assume less, and make better decisions when the stakes are high. So we're really good at taking complex situations and actually making, as we say, make order out of chaos.
Yeah, and so this program, your co-founder, Greg Williams, he built. So there's a lot of acronyms. Maybe you can like
Mhm.
break. I know the military loves acronyms.
Yeah. We try to scrub as many of those out as we can now and use good plain speak and plain English. But yeah, so Greg actually developed this concept of HBPRNA, human behavior pattern recognition analysis, which is just a scientific term for something you've been doing your entire life. So I'll give you a quick street definition. If you think back to when you were a little kid, no matter who raised you, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt and uncle, neighbor down the street, whoever it was, you knew when they walked in the room before they ever said a word if they were happy or sad or mad, or you got to go. In my case, I got to go run and hide because I'm about to catch a whooping for something that I did. Right? That's human behavior pattern recognition, and what people don't really get a lot of training in is the A part, the analysis, and it's usually done in some very specific context after the fact. Or you see all the pundits on TV, hey, why did this person do this and shoot up a school or kill people, and that's all great, that's all after the fact, that doesn't help me in the moment. So what Greg is really good at, is from his law enforcement and military experience, started out, literally kind of better ways to fight in the dojo on the street with cops, kind of how to figure out situations at a tactical sense, but really got into understanding human behavior and decision making and complexity. And the whole idea behind it is you want to be what we call left of bang, right? So you want to not walk into an ambush. You want to see something before it happens. And that's just how you make sense of the world. So it's a lot of sense making and problem solving, both at a tactical, operational, and strategic level. It's just a concept and some basic first principles. And you can really get into the details of it, but it's all based in science. So the Marine Corps wanted it in a sense because it was like, all right, how do we're sending, guys who could sometimes, like in my case, barely pass high school, right, into these really complex situations. This isn't just offensive operations. They're trained killers. They know how to do that, but it's not really what the mission was, right? So now I'm in and amongst the population and I've got to figure out what's going on, and I don't speak the language and everything looks and smells and feels different. And so how do I make sense of that? And how do I not walk into an ambush? And that was the basic concept behind it, was we want to be left of bang. Right. So how do I understand some basic principles of human behavior, right? To contextualize my observations, right? How do I take this data that I have, turn it into information, and then hopefully intelligence, right? And how do I do that in a way that I can repeat no matter where I'm at in the world, no matter what the situation is? And they're just having a really good structured observation and a common lexicon, right? So a way to describe and articulate what it is that you're seeing or doing.
Yeah, and so so you mentioned the Marines. You were a former Marine sniper, and this is where you met Greg. And I think the Army has its own version of this program,
Yep.
to spot insider threats, and it's used for different special operations variants. So what did the services keep finding useful about this?
So what it's so useful about it is it can apply to a number of different hard problems, right? That was all, a lot of work with DARPA, and DARPA calls it, hey, it's DARPA hard, right? It's got to be a really tough problem that we're trying to solve. And that's what they liked about it. So when we went to the Army with it, they called it advanced situational awareness training. And that's kind of become an overused term, situational awareness. And when we talk about it, when we use it, it's actually kind of use it more actually in a computer sense, right? If you think of a computers on a network, right, they have to have situational awareness in order to talk to one another, and where those terms came from. And that's what we kind of look at it as. But the Army we use it in different variations with them because they found the basic principles to work, whether there was dealing with an insider threat, whether it was a SOF unit, a special operations force unit, doing some low profile or covert meet with people, whether it was even, we did some work with them on suicide prevention and sexual harassment and assault prevention programs, because what you're trying to do is identify and articulate intent, right? So we don't profile human behavior, we profile anomalies, right? So it's, how do I establish a baseline, the context, with as much rigor and as much fidelity as possible. Then I can start to identify or articulate anomalies, things that are different, right? Things that aren't the same, and then work that into a decision-making process based on what my role and what my goal is in the situation. So Greg was really able to take a lot of very complex material that's very tough and kind of street it up so you can actually use it and make really good decisions off of it.
Yeah, and so like years later, what made you? So you first met Greg with these programs, and what got you interested in working for him after the fact?
Like you said, I was a sniper in the Marine Corps, and a lot of what you do as a sniper is actually just a lot of surveillance and reconnaissance, and you're watching people, right? And you get in a covert position, so it's really truly seeing things that people don't even realize they're under observation. And then when I ran into Greg and he was first testing and implementing these programs, I know the Office of Naval Research and DARPA was involved with this and vetting and validating it. I met him and I was like, okay, this guy is kind of like, I know about what he's talking about, not to that depth, but he's kind of oversimplifying it a little bit, right? And I actually kind of didn't really believe it. And then where I was working at with the infantry immersive trainer, training Marines to make better decisions under complex situations, I saw Marines that had the training coming through there, and they were better. They were clearly better. And I was like, okay, there's something going on here. I kept running into Greg all over the place. And then finally, I think we linked up in Afghanistan in 2012, passing through the airport or something. And he's like, hey, we got all these other programs if you're interested in coming over and work with me. And so I've been working with him since then. We were at different organizations based out of the Beltway. And then we started Arcadia Cognorati a while back to kind of do our own thing and keep the message pure and keep the move on to the next hard problems.
Yeah, I mean, then that's one thing about artificial intelligence that's kind of interesting, because it just has data, but it doesn't necessarily. It's kind of difficult for it to take context out of that data. But humans, and this is part of like what your program was set to establish, kind of gets you out of your baseline loop to see things that you might have otherwise missed.
So context is everything, right? And humans are naturally and implicitly much better at that, because we're observing or measuring something within a given set of parameters or for a specific situation. Where, like you said, machine, it's just got data and it's trying to do pattern recognition, right? That's why our stuff, a lot of what we do translates really well into computers and software, because it's pattern recognition. We do it with humans. We can train a machine in a sense to do it better, but to contextualize the information is everything. And that's actually what we focus on when we're even training with, like, let's say law enforcement officers who have a ton of experience. They've been dealing with people their whole career, and they're always looking for, all right, what are these indicators I need to see? Or what are these things I need to look for? And it's like, well, we don't teach people what to look for. It's how to look, how to make sense of the environment and get some more time and distance between you and a potential bad situation or bad decision, right? And then how do I do that? Well, sense making and problem solving. I can learn a little bit about structured observation, establish that baseline. And so that's the context, and that's everything for us, right? Because the context that you're in establishes the relevance of your observation. Well, that's no different than any type of information you're gathering or a sensor collecting information. It's not just that information may be useless, it may be incredibly insightful, but it's all based on what the context is. So establishing that and that robust fidelity field baseline is where we really, really are good at, because we can do that better than most people, right? We know how to do that because it's a lot of times just some cognitive labeling, some organization of the information, what you call things and how you talk about it, and then how you categorize it, and then how you use that information. And we make it very, very user friendly, in a sense that anyone can do it.
Right. And so, like, you've talked a lot about situational awareness. And so, like, what's the difference between like what you're teaching these people and what you're now sort of teaching AI about the difference between like what most people think of situational awareness and what's actually going on here?
Yeah, so that's a great question, because situational awareness again is kind of only it's a term that's used a lot, but it's really depends again on what the context is and the relevance of everything that you're doing. So there's no like really like, oh, we want general situational awareness. It's like, well, you can, right, but you have to. That means you're just using an algorithm. You're doing baseline plus anomaly equals decision, right? How do I establish this baseline? What are the incongruent signals that I'm seeing? And then that process works no matter what the context is, right? So I'm all focused on what really is up front that I can develop that baseline with. So, in a sense, whether it's a sensor system or it's an algorithm, or anytime you're classifying data and information or trying to get it into the realm of information and not just data, you have to be careful on how you do that and what you want to do. And so that again depends on what your mission is and what your goal is and all that. But for example, we've done some work with different companies, and we did a DARPA project, which is great. That one I can talk about. It's not a classified thing or anything, but it was URSA. It was this urban reconnaissance through supervised autonomy. This is years back, where they said, how do we take bots, drones, and send them maybe ahead of a military unit coming through this village. And we determine, okay, is there likely an ambush? How would that work? What would that look like? Can we classify hostile intent? And our thing is like, well, before you get to hostile intent, let's just classify intent in general. Well, based on this area that you're in, because I can do a basic geographic profile and teach a system how to do that, where the most likely areas are you're going to get ambushed. There's only so many places someone can do that if you're coming through. And then I go, well, what's the behavior in that area? What's the functional field of view and orientation of everyone? Because that you can measure on a camera system. You can measure that on a different sensor, right? Where are people oriented? What's typical? Where is everyone coming and going to? What are the areas and how the normal ways of travel or natural lines of drift that they're using? And then from that baseline, you can say, well, out of that, there's only a few people on here who aren't doing that. So why is it that they're not? Is this the farmer in the field who's just hanging out taking a break? Or is he the guy spotting that area, calling someone else in? Where's the positive, negative, and dead space in these areas? So once you start to classify those things and you label them, it's very easy for a human or machine to go, oh, wait a minute, this is an incongruent signal. This needs to be investigated further. And then from there, you start to establish a pattern of other incongruent signals. So like for a great example is, if anyone's seen the photo of when the Tsarnaev brothers attacked the Boston Marathon, there's this great photo of them in the crowd, and there's the whole crowd watching the marathon. Those two are not, and there's even a police officer in it, but he's looking up and out over here at the crowd, and you're going, just this enough alone, this one simple observation that a camera system could be trained to pick up is enough to investigate further. Now we'll break down why and the reasoning behind that and how to create a reasoned inference out of that, because everything we do, again, since we work especially with law enforcement, military, right, it has to fit within the legal system. So I have to go from that's interesting to reasonable suspicion to probable cause to beyond a reasonable doubt. So it has to create this kind of burden of proof progression. So what you're doing is you're basically just doing hypothesis testing, right? And you're going, if it's this, what else should I expect to see? If it's that, what else should I expect to see? So humans get that, and then that translates well into a machine, because there's only so much within a given defined context that it has to look for or has to identify.
Yeah, so I mean, let's kind of unpack that a little bit, right? So you're basically talking about helping a machine provide context. it otherwise would have to learn by itself, right? And everybody has heard this term with AI: garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
So, like right now, where do you see AI systems being fed bad context right now?
Anytime you're trying to you're good, you're going too general, or you're trying to do too much, right? And this was goes back to even with the URSA and the DARPA program, when they said, well, I don't know if, and this is 5 years ago, and they're going, well, I don't know if we have the compute yet to kind of figure all that out. I don't know if we have this info. And I go, hey, hang on, like, you don't need all of that. What are the few things that we can do right now really well? It's like, okay, well, can it establish a baseline? Okay, what would that look like? Well, let's label some of these areas, some of these atomic actions that humans are doing, and compare those. So all you need to do is do the comparison between the atomic actions of these people right here, and how is it different than this one right here? Oh, we're noticing a difference. Okay, so all you have to do is keep it as simple as possible at first. Now, what the different AI systems obviously are trying to do is, like, it's, let's get as much in there. We need more data. We need more data. We need more training data. It's like, no, you don't. And the funny thing is, there's some great work, especially on decision making and what's called recognition prime decision making. There's a guy, Dr. Gary Klein, who's brilliant at it, and they study subject matter experts. And you get a lot of insight when you're studying subject matter experts, because what they're really good is compressing large amounts of data or information or experience, right? And to get to an answer very quickly. And so I'd rather get the opinion of a few deep subject matter experts than all the information I have access to, because I'm already one step ahead with where I need to be. And so I think when we look at some of the systems, they're trying to do too much with too much information. But man, if that information is bad and it's coming from the internet most of the time, or Reddit, so it's like, what are we really pulling this from, and how do we contextualize it? So I think that's what I typically see, is people trying to do too much in cases where you don't have to. I mean, it's like, you just get it right first in this one narrow context, or keep it within the four corners of the document with some constraints on it. And then you start to automatically filter out, oh, well, I don't need all of this information. So one of the things we are good at too, it's not just about, here, how do I classify everything? It's, well, if I can get rid of, half of the data that I don't need to look at, or half of this information, well, I'm one step ahead now, because now I can focus on what actually matters. So sometimes it's saying, well, we don't need all of this over here if we just focus in these areas.
Yeah, and you mentioned DARPA projects a couple of times, and one of them was the urban reconnaissance through supervised autonomy. So these autonomous systems would go into areas and assess the likelihood of intent from
Yep.
observed. Yeah. So, like, how did that work out, and what came out of that?
So it's really interesting, because those problems are hard. And any time you're dealing with anything, Department of Defense related, for us, law enforcement related, and we have other different, like, public safety sector clients, like, the stakes are very, very high. And there's also focused on this, this decision making, the human in the loop. And we got to have it. This is, again, years ago, 5, 6 years ago on that one, and we're actually working on another one right now. But it's interesting, because they become really hard when, all right, we want the machine or the system to do this. Okay, even if it's really good at doing this, there's still a human in there that either has to synthesize that information, that has to make a decision off of it. And they're coming in with their own tacit knowledge and experience, and different biases that are usually helpful if they're subject matter experts in those areas, that are going to, they have to connect there in some way. So if the human and the machine, in a sense, are speaking two different languages, well, it's very hard to communicate. So the decision making, sometimes that decision making loop gets interrupted by either too much information, or the machine going, well, you're giving me this answer, but I know something else that the machine doesn't know. And so there's all these different constraints on it, because they're pushing it out to, at a tactical level or an operational level. I mean, you see this stuff used even more now, strategically, with everything in Iran. And it's like, well, but did you update that location? Well, did a person verify that that's what it was? Because the computer's thinking one thing, and the person who knows about that goes, well, no, that's wrong. And so where is that loop fit in? And that it's really interesting on those government projects like that, because they have entire, we're on that. There's a team called LME, Legal, Moral, and Ethical. And they're literally, their whole job is to go, what does this fit within the legal, moral, and ethical constraints that it should, if there's humans involved and we're taking people's lives. Like, this is a very, very high standard, high bar. So you have to get it right. This isn't just, just ship it and we'll fix it, on point two. It's like, no. You have to get this right, the first time. So that's really difficult. So what comes out of that is a lot of insight into what I generally would call, all right, what really matters? What are we really trying to do? And so you actually take a very, very constraints kind of led approach to what you do, and then you're getting a better quality right out the gate. And so if you just kind of, in a sense, which is not always good if you're a tech company and you're trying to create shareholder value, but you're trying to ship everything and get everything out as quickly as possible. We need more of this. But when you take that constraints approach and you apply it to very specific contexts, you get to see what really matters. And anything human behavior related, it validated so much of our work, of what we've been doing and what we've known, that kind of would have been tough to validate. But because of the rigor in the testing and experimentation, we were saying, like, wow, this is even, although we have all of this great information and feedback saying this works really well, this works even better than we thought. So that was really interesting coming out of that. And again, just anytime you're trying to implement that, a human in the loop, and there's a whole nother level of complexity there that I think kind of gets left behind in a lot of projects.
Yeah, and this is something that I don't know if we've really touched on, but this isn't something that you guys just cooked up yesterday to join the AI hype wagon. You guys have been doing this for decades, literally.
Yeah, and Greg's been doing it longer than anybody because he kind of developed this. And then the same thing with the vetting and the testing of it. That's why we even bring up some of the military stuff. It's not because what we do is a military only skill set. It's human behavior related. It just the decisions are very important there because the consequences are so high. But yeah, we've been doing this for decades. We literally have a textbook on human behavior pattern recognition analysis. Different universities use it, whether it's with their criminal justice programs or psych programs, because it's a very elegant way to take complex areas and multidisciplinary study of human behavior and use it that's to create something that's useful. So, like, I'm not an academic, I'm a practitioner. I've got a few degrees to back things up, but I'm more on the practitioner side, right? I'm not the professor side. But all of those cognitive scientists, anyone, neuroscientists, anyone you interact with or who's had interaction with our program, and decision scientists, they love it because they're like, this is the most elegant way I've ever seen doing this. I can't do what you do. I can talk about it all day long. I can go into detail about it, but I can't go out and do it in the way you're doing it. And that's where the rubber meets the road, is where that's our milieu, right? That's our area of expertise.
Right. And so, there's, several people trying to copy this methodology, and like, what are those people generally getting wrong?
There's, because this stuff has been open. There's even books written about that combat hunter program that were written by people who went through the course and loved it so much they wrote a book about it. And it's all Greg's work. But and there's other people trying to do it. I think for a lot of what I've seen them do is focus again on some of the noise and not get down to the pure signal, right? So what people don't know about those programs that we built and Greg built and we implemented is, they were built for a specific customer at a specific time for a specific purpose. So not everything can then continue on, or not everything can translate into a new domain. You have to take a look at what those needs are, what that organization is trying to do, what the outcomes they're trying to achieve. Then you have to build it off that. Now, all the science and the methodology and all that works, but it has to be kind of built in a sense to what you're trying to achieve versus just a general way of doing it. And so that's what I've seen, is just they're not bridging the gap there on some of what they're doing. And it's fine. It's, what are these people are, Greg's happy with it. He said, he's like, look, there's a whole book written about my work. It's the best after action review someone's ever written on one of my programs. Like, it's an honor. I hope someone reads it and saves their life. I didn't get any credit for it, but
Yeah. Um, so like I came across you guys because I was looking deeper into this company called M42. So like kind of expand a little bit about that. Like how did you guys get connected with M42?
So we got connected through M42 through some of our healthcare contacts, right? So we did some work, and especially actually during the pandemic, we were part of some initiatives that were going on, which was really interesting. I got to meet some highly renowned, world renowned molecular pathologists who were like, "Hey, what you guys do is exactly what I do. I'm hunting these viruses, and you're hunting this," and we spoke the same language. But then over time, we worked with some hospital networks and in a few other areas. And then I actually don't even remember who originally linked us up on the call with Mr. Roshan and some of the folks from M42. But when we met, it was instant like, hey, wait, who are these people? Wait, what are they doing? And they were kind of doing the same thing to us. And we talked, and then they went through what some of the things they were doing with M42, specifically around fraud, waste, and abuse, and how they can look at data. And I was like blown away because I'm going, hey, no one is doing it this way. That's exactly how we do it. We call it this and we call it that. And then there was just an instant kind of like kinship in a sense. And I would say because they're behaviorists, we're behaviorists. I don't care about some of the things that people get into about human behavior because I go off of what I can prove and what I can measure. And they were the same way. And they were doing it in such a fascinating way. And it was a very effective way. And so there was an instant kind of like, all right, we got to do something together here kind of connection, which is really cool. And so we've been involved with M42 for several years now. I think maybe 4 or 5 years. It's already 2026, so maybe even longer. I'm not sure.
And like in your own words, how would you describe transformational AI? Because that's something that's sort of unique and proprietary to M42.
So they have a very unique, a very interesting approach to what they're doing, right? So they're going into companies and they're saying, okay, we're going to use our AI systems and we're going to kind of keep your leadership and keep your company running how it is. You're already doing successful things. And we're going to add in this like additional layer of this transformational AI, and we're going to find the most effective way for you to change this, or most effective efficient way to run this area. And it's really, really interesting and really fascinating, their approach. I've never seen anything like it. And I think they're doing things they everything from construction to healthcare, to then now different blockchain, and to all kinds of different areas. And it's really it's a very utile, explicit use or direct use within the context of how they're using their AI systems, which I'm like, hey, that's, to me, that's one of the best ways to do things, because again, you're looking for specific outcomes, and you're using the synthesis of information that you didn't even know was valuable that you have, and you're trying to capitalize on that, and you're trying to increase revenue, you're trying to increase your profit margins. And it's really, really interesting how they're doing it. I would love to even know more about some of the behind the scenes that I haven't had time to ask some questions on, because we've been talking about so many other things. But it's a really fascinating business model that they have.
Yeah, and one of the like unique aspects of this is the cross pollination potential, like within the different portfolio companies. So, like, where do you see human behavior plugging in to these different modalities potentially?
So is we say that HBPRNA can be used on anything, any human, or anything that's touched or influenced by a human, right? Because there are certain principles and certain rules and things that people follow that they don't even realize that they're doing. And they kind of, the way you can understand that is that anything that, if you're operating within a human, whether that's a human and machine or human to human interaction, there's going to be certain things that happen. There's going to be certain seams and gaps. There's going to be certain mistakes that are going to be made, and all humans are going to set patterns. So from those patterns, you can determine things like intent. You can then forecast and do predictive analysis on it, and come up with what's the most likely thing, what's the most dangerous thing, and then you can make better informed decisions off of it. So your reasoned inference is so much better when you understand how these principles work in real time with people, because it goes across everything. I mean, I used to make the joke like, yeah, this skill set made me, you know, a better sniper and better hunter of insurgents and that, but like it also makes me a better father and a better husband because I'm seeing things before they happen, right? And so it doesn't matter what that is. If you get those principles and understand how people are and how they behave, not what they're Google searching, not what they say, not what they think, it's what they actually do in these given contexts. Everyone just establishes patterns. So you start to see those better, which obviously for anything with data and information is going to help out tremendously because now you are actually interacting a little bit more with that information because you know how to look for things in the context of whatever it is you're using it for.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. I mean, just sort of just myself, just right now coming up with like ideas is you could increase sales at a store, right? Because maybe you spent too much time with this person that obviously was never going to buy anything, uh, and then you miss the obvious visible cues of the other person who was beyond establishing intent, but like nobody was helping this person out. So you lost a sale because you were wasting time with the wrong thing.
That's a great example, and what these different AI systems now or you know, allow us to do is it actually you can compare and use real data and real like you can link things together that you otherwise wouldn't link before. You can establish relevance of certain observations that you wouldn't have before. And sales is a great one because people go, well, you know, if you either got you got it or you don't, or you got to know how to sales and you know, do sales and you got to practice. Like, yeah, that's it's true. Like but also no, not really. Someone can learn. It's about targeting. So what you just talked about is targeting. Now I have a different background in targeting, right, from a long time ago, but it doesn't matter what you're targeting. It's going, well, what can I rely on, right? So a lot of times for those sales is like, well, someone just had it in them, and you know, you get someone that's really good at it, and they have all of this tacit knowledge and experience, and they're very, you know, they can pick up on these subtle cues, but if they can't articulate that and say what that is or how it works, then it's kind of like it's lost when that person leaves. But if you have a process behind it and now you have data to inform your decisions, right? Now you're getting more, now you're getting better at it, right? You're increasing that effectiveness. So, like you said, I'm going, well, I'm sitting here spending my time on this, and that's a waste of time. But that person is giving off all the signals that are demonstrating their intent. They're far more interested, right? But I'm using these kind of like, you know, these different biases or bad heuristics or selected priors that I thought had worked in the past, you know, just me just thinking through it, but I'm not actually relying on real data. I mean, what people think, you know, they're using or doing isn't always what it is, right? What am I actually basing my decisions on? So yeah, that's a great example of how we do that. And then we do work with different private sector clients and executive teams, and same thing where it's like getting to the root of what the actual issues are. A lot of things come up is like, well, we've got these people issues, or it's a culture thing, or there's these interpersonal conflict, and we'll go in there and start asking some questions, and then and by the end of the day, they're like, oh my god, we had no idea what the real problem was. It's like, yeah, you're drawing on things you've learned from the past, but that's actually not what's happening right here in the room. So you're not using the right information to make those decisions on. So you're always going to be wrong if you do that, and then you're going to continue and repeat that cycle. So let's refocus. Let's orient on the right things, right, to measure and assess, and then we can establish a baseline, and now we can start to look and hunt for those anomalies, and that's the basic way of doing it. I mean, we literally boil everything down to baseline plus anomaly equals decision, and there's a lot more to it than that, obviously, but that's the simplest algorithm you can start thinking of, like what's typical, what's normal. Okay, then what is it about this situation that's incongruent with that? What am I seeing? And then, okay, what can I do about that? Or what do I need to access more information? Do I need to go intervene? Do I need to go contact this person? So that's that B plus A equals D. It's like the most elegant way to put it that anyone can use.
So for anybody listening in right now, like, what's the best place to find the Human Behavior podcast, and what's like one thing you want everyone to walk away with that's going to watch this interview here?
That's, well, finding us, you can go to arcadiacognorati.com. You can look me up, Brian Marren, on LinkedIn, and please connect. And then the Human Behavior podcast is on every podcast player, and it's on our website at Arcadia as well. You can kind of search through some of the episodes as well to kind of, if you have some specific things you're looking to see if we've covered, because we've covered a lot on our podcast, everything from, we have a range of people that listen to the show. But something to take away from this is, decision making is a very, very complex process, and human behavior is two things at the same time that kind of seem like, they contradict one another. But human behavior is incredibly complex, but it's also very simple, right? We have very simple, basic things. And so if I go off of what people do, not what they say, not what they think, not what they feel, what is it that they actually do? You're going to get a much better reasoned inference, right? You're going to come to a better conclusion on it. And there's ways you can do that. Is I tell people, take a yellow pad and draw a line down the middle. And on just something you can practice. On the left side, you write what someone said, and then on the right side, you write what they actually ended up doing. And then you write what they said on the left side, and then you write what they did on the right side. And you're going to see sometimes an incongruence there and go, oh, wait a minute, right? This person's saying this, but they're actually doing this. And it's a great way to highlight, right, how that kind of, how how human beings set patterns, but also how I can detect those. And then I can project into the future with that information, right? So it's, what am I likely going to see next? If this is what I think it seems, then what else should I expect to see? And so I go through the world and I tell people, just constantly be curious with your environment, find things interesting, and test your hypothesis. Like, just constantly do hypothesis testing, and you are going to see an entire world out there that you had no idea even existed.
Oh man, I mean, I can't wait to see how this shapes up for, especially all the things with the transformational AI, and how it just makes all of these systems better.
It's interesting. M42 is extremely interesting. What they're doing with AI is just I haven't found anything else like it, and I think that it's going to be very effective, because they're also, what they did was, they're working with companies that have past performance. This isn't a new thing. It's not a black box. It's not like, oh, I'm just throwing AI on everything now because that I might get some money. It's like, no, they've been in the AI game before, and anyone even was using that term as much as it's being used today.
Yeah, well, we'll have to have you back on after a lot of these things have been applied.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it anytime.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. All right, everybody, take it easy.
Thank you.